This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Mr. Speaker, the question was about the Prime Minister's billion-dollar green slush fund scandal. We already know while he forces 2 million Canadians to a food bank and doubled housing costs, is quadrupling the carbon tax, he has a billion-dollar fund that whose own bureaucrats say reminds them of the sponsorship scandal, whose executives give money to their own companies. Yesterday, a courageous whistleblower testified the Prime Minister's Innovation Minister lied, and I quote, lied to the committee. Why is this minister and his boss, the Prime Minister, covering up this scandal and waste of Canadian tax dollars?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
It's not surprising that the Conservative leader doesn't want to talk about his failed Republican-style plan to shut down Parliament last week. All his 30-hour temper tantrum achieved was to show Canadians the party's true colors and cost Canadians $2 million in wasteful spending. The Conservative Party tried to cut affordable childcare, cut construction of affordable housing, and defund the police and Canada's armed forces. While they want to bring us back to the Stone Age, we'll stay focused on Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Canadians are forced to eat stone soup this winter after this Prime Minister gave us the worst food price inflation in 40 years, and we have 2 million Canadians, a record-smashing number, lined up at food banks. I know the Prime Minister is desperate to avoid defending his own track record, or worse yet, his quadrupling of the carbon tax. There is a common-sense Conservative bill, C-234, in the Senate, up for the vote today. Will the Prime Minister stop blocking the bill, axe the tax so that our farmers can feed families?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party of Canada had the opportunity to support affordability measures for Canadians, but instead they chose to take 30 hours attacking the most vulnerable. During the Conservative leader's $2 million temper tantrum, they gladly stood against veterans experiencing homelessness, against emergency shelters for women and girls, against Indigenous housing, against rapid affordable housing construction. They even tried to prevent support for those who lost their homes in Hurricane Fiona. That leader is reckless and should be ashamed.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The truth is that the Prime Minister is not spending money on any of those things. He has a food program that doesn't feed kids, it feeds bureaucracies and creates frameworks that kids can't eat. He has a housing affordability program that doubles the cost of housing, a housing accelerator that hasn't built a single house, a carbon tax that hasn't reduced emissions. So instead of spending billions on programs that cause inflation and do nothing but sound pretty, why won't he axe the tax on our farmers so that they can feed Canadians this winter?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Whether the leader of the opposition makes a homemade video about it or not, a key factor contributing to food inflation around the world is Putin's illegal war in Ukraine. That party has been playing right into the Kremlin's hands by voting against Operation Unifier, by voting against funding for military aid to Ukraine, and by voting at every opportunity, including again this morning, against the Canada-U-Trade free trade agreement that Ukrainians have been asking for. We will never abandon Ukraine, unlike the Conservative leader who's shown Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister is desperate to distract from the misery that he caused here at home. I wonder if he could just for once think about Canadians instead of thinking about himself. We have 2 million Canadians lined up in food banks, a record-smashing number. He's doubled the cost of housing. He wants to quadruple the carbon tax. 9 in 10 young people say they'll never be able to afford a home. We understand with this miserable record, he doesn't want to talk about Canada or Canadians. He'd rather spread falsehood about faraway foreign lands, Mr. Speaker. Will he not stand up for once for Canada, axe the tax so our families can eat?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, Conservative leaders' partisan vitriol and performance games are hurting Canadians. Let's talk about their record directly. When it came to 988, the suicide crisis helpline, how did they just vote? Against. When it came to the Lac-Mégantic rail bypass, how did they vote against? Against. When it came to the new Montreal Holocaust Museum on the first night of Hanukkah, how did they vote? Against. Mr. Speaker, there is clearly nothing this Conservative leader won't compromise.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
There's been explosive testimony by a whistleblower on this Prime Minister's billion-dollar green slush fund that's seen $150 million misappropriated and gone to Liberal insiders. And senior NDP Liberal government officials have said there is no plan to get Canadians back their missing millions. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, it's clear that he's not worth that cost, and probably why he wouldn't even stick around. Will the Prime Minister shut down the slush fund and get Canadians back their money?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, it is shocking but not surprising to see the Conservative ideology in full display, Mr. Speaker. Now what you're saying, Mr. Speaker, is that the Conservative are willing to attack anyone and any institution that would fight for climate change, Mr. Speaker. Even institutions that have been voted by the Parliament in 2001, Mr. Speaker. Now what the Conservative are doing, they're calling the integrity into question of one of the top accounting firm in this country, Mr. Speaker. We will fight for Canadians, we will fight for climate change, and we'll restore governance in that institution.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
On this side of the House, what we're doing is fighting Liberal corruption. We're going to keep doing that, even though this minister and his chief of staff, though they say it didn't happen, were briefed on what was going on at SCTC, but it was done orally so that they wouldn't be subject to ATIP rules. It's $150 missing million given outside the funding agreement, and we have 2 Liberal-appointed board members who are under investigation by the Ethics Commissioner. We have an Auditor General investigation, and we have whistleblowers blowing the lid off this thing that shows that this minister and that Prime Minister don't have the courage to fight for Canadian tax dollars. Where are the missing millions? Who got rich?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we will fight for Canadians every day, Mr. Speaker. Let's be very clear. What you're saying again, and for Canadians which are watching at home, don't be fooled. You're seeing Conservative ideology to fight against anyone, any institution, even those they voted for in 2001, Mr. Speaker, to create in this House an institution that would fight for climate change, Mr. Speaker. We suspended the funding of the organization. We called for an investigation. The leadership has resigned. We'll get to the bottom of this, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from